Well, let's go to our first conversation today. Now, the Minister of State for Industry, Trade, Industry in the Ministry of Trade and Investment, Senator John Enoh, on Monday said the economic value of implementing the Nigeria First policy is about 3 trillion naira annually. He stated this while briefing State House correspondents shortly after the Federal Executive Council meeting at the State House in Abuja. Now, on May 5, 2025, President Bola Tinubu announced a plan to issue an executive order which would ensure that Nigerians patronise goods and services that are produced in Nigeria. Senator Enoh said the policy would also contribute about 20% to the growth of the manufacturing sector in Nigeria in the next 3 years. Now, he further explained that over 500,000 jobs would be created through the policy in the short term and lead to a reduction of about 30% of imports. My guest is the Honorable Minister of State for Industry and the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, Senator John Enoh. Is live with me in our Abuja studios. Good afternoon. It's good to see you, Honorable Minister.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much for being here. I think we should start this is a good one, Nigeria First policy. But let me ask, tell us some further basics or take us through the key features of this initiative.
Well, you know that, the details of the initiative as announced by Mr. President, which, by the way, was an incredibly awesome announcement, pronouncement by Mr. President.
Yes.
As usual, this president takes the lead, in his leadership, and his presidency. The details, are being worked out.
Okay.
Like you reported rightly, the president, immediately after he finished the announcement or the pronouncement, he just, gave the papers and all to the Attorney General of the Federation to fine-tune and all of that, So it's, so those details are coming. But ahead of those details, it's like I've acknowledged, and I've still done so now. I think that, in the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, we see Mr. President's pronouncement as a gift to the sector, because, by the way, it's as Minister over the promotion of made in Nigeria goods and services. Sure. So my job is just well cut out. And therefore, in coming out with the figures and the statistics that I try to come out with in terms of economic value, about 3 trillion, annually, in terms of the fact that we're going to witness about a 20% increase in the manufacturing sector and all of that. It's a fallout of the beginning work that I had done already in trying to prepare myself, for the implementation of all of these, because when I looked at my mandate and I saw the promotion of Nigerian goods and services, it was so exciting, because in one of the trips I made outside, trying to look at industries and all of that, in what I call a national industry push, I encountered, life, industries that are coping with, our very difficult operating environment. Don't forget, before the administration of President Bola Tinubu, almost on a weekly basis, there were reports about industries closing shop and relocating and all of that. Thank God that hasn't happened anymore. In itself is, a testament to the kind of, good faith and the kind of confidence that Mr. President Bola Tinubu's presidency has brought in and all of that. But having said so, there are a few things that we need to be able to tackle. One of them has to do with the fact that, if industries and companies, manufacturers are staying on and are producing goods, and those goods are not being bought, because of, our inclination as a country and as a people for foreign-made goods and services and all of that. Yeah. What it means is that there's something that we need to do. You can imagine. Okay, and there are people elsewhere who have tried to question, talk about the fact that are we even sure that we have those goods that Mr. President's pronouncement, entails us to now begin to patronize? My response quickly, is to the fact that the manufacturing sector, these manufacturers also need to have the confidence that their goods will be bought.
Very important.
Right? A lot of the foreign manufacturers and producers who are not producing in country, if they find out, for example, that there's renewed determination, right, on the part of Nigerians following Mr. President's policy pronouncement to look inwards, they'll be encouraged to come in and to come and set up manufacturing companies and industrial concerns because of the assurance and the guarantee that their goods and services will be bought. Right? If you talk about the auto sector, for example, I mean, a lot of the big auto manufacturing companies and all that will not just come and set up shop and auto producing plants and all that in our country, unless they are sure that there's local demand. Unless they're sure there's local demand. So all of these, are all, they are all implicated in terms of what this policy is likely going to cause. And the more companies, begin to produce, the more companies are able to sell the goods that they produce, the more it's going to enhance their capacity, both in terms of what? Creating more jobs, in terms of expansion, in terms of utilization, and all of that. So all of this is just together. And there is nothing better, I believe, that has happened in the last few months compared to that pronouncement by Mr. President. To the extent that we're able to implement it, and affect it, and get it to happen. Because
that's where I'm headed. I'm looking at some resistance that may come from entrenched procurement interests. Some people might just want to. So what happens? How do we manage that? That's talking about interest. That's one. Then we are a country of more than 200 million people. And many would say, do we have that capacity? At the moment, where are we? And what are we doing to improve capacity, of our industries, our producers, and all of that? What are those things we are doing too?
Well, you're talking about pushback by some entrenched interest and all of that.
Yes.
Again, I think that part of what is going to be worked out by the time the details of this policy are eventually unveiled and announced is going to be setting up an implementation framework to get this to happen. Right? In the last few weeks, since after Mr. President's pronouncement, it has also been discovered that we've had some executive orders in the past.
Yes.
Executive order 3 and 5.
True.
That have tended to speak to this subject.
True.
So what it means is that if there is something different that this government has to do and will do, is to give effect to the implementation of those various pronouncements that have taken place in the past, especially when now it is Mr. President himself that has made such a pronouncement. And you're also right, you're talking about entrenched interest, procurement, and all of that. And, you are right to the extent that the public sector is also where the greatest challenge is. You know why? Because the public sector is also the hugest, spender in terms of public resources, whether public sector at the national level or at the state level or at whatever levels, and all that. What and what do they do? And being able to get them to rethink what they do. A lot of this is going to require behavioral changes. True. A lot of this is going to come by way of maybe how much you are able to appeal to the patriotism of Nigerians. But beyond that, it's because one of the things we've also tried to do in the ministry is to see how you can match this up with the quality of even what is produced. Fortunately, there's also existing in the ministry what we call a national quality policy.
Okay.
One of the things we plan to do is to be able to, embark on a national campaign, right, on the adoption and promotion of general goods and services. But following that campaign is also going to be what? A campaign for quality products. So beyond appealing to the patriotism of Nigerians, there's also the assurance they are not being told or made to buy goods that are of less quality than some other goods. So all of this is going to take place to make this something that now happens. Because when it happens, and if it happens, and hopefully it's going to happen, it's going to be some kind of jump start really to Nigeria's industrial and manufacturing base, which is what we need actually. The fact, for example, you've talked about a country of about 200 and something million people. You are right. But that same country, with such a huge number, also offers us such a huge market.
Opportunity and market. I agree with
Such
you.
a huge market.
True.
So if we just look inwards, and this is coming, the timing is so right at the time that we have a President Trump doing what he's doing in the United States, we cannot be seen to be doing any different in terms of the kind of reaction that we also do. We also make back home. So you can imagine unleashing 200 something million people, getting them to look inwards, in terms of their preferences, in terms of their choices, in terms of what they want to demand from the market, in terms of goods and services as well. Don't forget, there's also services. It's not just about the goods that you see, it's also about the services that Nigerians are able to offer, but which are being allowed to be offered by foreigners. All of this, is part of the package. It's as comprehensive as that.
So job creation and all of that, just like I was saying when we went on that break, our manufacturers now have a lot to do. There's a lot of work to do. Before now, we're talking about trading with African countries, improving our production and all of that. Now that we are promoting our made in Nigeria products and want to push it, what sort of conversation are we going to be having with manufacturers, and what are your expectations from Nigerian manufacturers in meeting standards and, being very competitive, considering the challenging environment? Some will talk about power. Some will talk about some other issues that they face around their business environment.
First, let me start by saying that the manufacturers, through MAN, organized private sector and all of that, have greatly applauded Mr. President's policy pronouncement on the Nigerian First Initiative. When I say that that pronouncement was a gift to the ministry, it's even more so a gift to the manufacturing sector, right? I mean, you're talking about, job creation and all of that. And I've had cause to, to say this once, here and there, about the fact that government, the public sector, cannot continue to be the hugest employer of labor. We need to get to a point in which that trajectory changes to the other side, the private sector. By the time the president is enabled to do more, to produce more, to manufacture more, to create more, they're going to expand their own capacity to employ more. In a lot of other, more developed clients, developed countries, there's less and less of government playing a role in terms of job creation. It enables that job creation. So first, and I've said it, in the course of this program, that this policy pronouncement is an enabler in itself for that job creation that we expect the private sector or manufacturers to be able to provide. You've talked about how prepared the manufacturers are. I mean, the manufacturers, okay. Now, from day one, when I became Minister of State for Industry, and I started my engagement with the private sector, it was with the understanding and from my appreciation that, you can't come out with policies, industrial policies, who have to be driven from them, right? From the factories, not from anywhere else. And that therefore collaboration and working with them was going to be key. From when Mr. President made this pronouncement, I believe that the manufacturers themselves also know what the high expectations are of them. All what you've been crying for and talking about, now is the time. But the manufacturers, like other Nigerians as well, are also waiting to see what the next developments are, to see us be able to, go beyond the pronouncements and to action. What are those actionable frameworks that are being put together that can make them have the confidence that for the first time, we're going to go beyond pronouncement in terms of made in Nigeria? I mean, made in Nigeria matter has been around for several years.
It has.
But like other things, we've just been paying lip service to it. So there's been the challenge of enforcement and the challenge of implementation. And I think that these are the two things that now have to be added to make this a different matter altogether. The more this happens, the more the manufacturers are challenged to produce more. The more others that are manufacturing elsewhere, not in our country, are going to be encouraged to come and set up factories and industries here to produce. Because they will be challenged by the fact that this country is now focused on what? Nigeria First policy.
Yes.
That means that we are going to be we're going to look more at those goods and services that are produced in country. It is only in exceptional cases where we can't find such goods that waivers would then be provided to get into import and all of that. In terms of the statistics that I gave at the beginning at some point, and I said that in the next 3 years or whatever, this policy, properly enforced and implemented, is going to lead to a reduction of about 30% of unnecessary, unwanted imports. You can imagine how much of that continues to be a drag in terms of our foreign exchange. Nigeria's macroeconomic environment has changed beyond what it was several years ago. True. So we need to continue to be very sensitive to every dollar that we pay out because we are importing goods and services to the extent that we can provide them in country. Fortunately, we also have in place in the ministry, we have the Standards Organization of Nigeria that is supposed to be doing what? Whose responsibility to enforce standards. So when we talk about enforcement both in terms of those goods and in terms of the quality of those goods. In country, we already have some goods that are produced in country that are competitive enough. Even more competitive than some of the goods that come into our country.
I agree with you.
So every agency of government is going to be involved in this. To what extent does this policy pronouncement make agencies like customs and all of that are responsible for taking care of our borders? So the influx of goods and services into our country unnecessarily, without documentation, can now cease. Smuggling goods and things like that. Yes. There are goods that come into this country that are of low quality and that compete in the marketplace with locally produced goods that are better. But because they are of low quality, prices are therefore less, and Nigerians have a greater tendency to want to patronize them. So this is a holistic thing. Yeah. It's not just a tax for industry, trade and investment alone, but almost every other ministry and agency of
has
government
has a role to play
to get this to happen.
And there's going to be a lot of monitoring and evaluation. We hope to always have you to break this down. Let's look at some other things you're doing, because I know there's a lot of work. The last time we had this chart, the automotive industry development plan, updates around that, what's happening around that space too, because it's very important that that sector is going to play a very important role in this Nigerian First policy too. Where are we with regards to our vehicles? Are we keying into the electric vehicles? Are we getting into that level of CNG vehicles that are what will be on the roads very, very soon? That's what we'll be seeing very soon.
One sector that has also expressed its own excitement at Mr. President's policy pronouncement is the auto sector, the auto industry. Right? The auto industry has been shepherded by the National Automotive Design and Development Council, NADDC. And they've done an awesome job, so far. They've been a very engaging agency, very engaging with its stakeholders. And one of the first sessions, that I had outside of Abuja since coming to the ministry was, courtesy of the auto, or, the NADDC, where we had a session with, auto manufacturers and all of that.
Okay.
And, on that day, I was quick to make a remark, and I said that when I arrived, Lagos Airport, and I was being taken to my hotel and to the event, I was driven by a Nigerian assembled car. Right? As similarly symbolic, isn't it?
That's commendable.
But I think that it goes much more than that. Right? And I think that, we have some auto assembly plants in our country. They continue to compete unequally with, how much other cars are brought in, foreign made and foreign assembled cars, compete unfairly with a lot of second-hand, vehicles that keep coming to our country. So when I said that, we have to be holistic and comprehensive in the way we approach this policy pronouncement to make it work. It is also to look at the fact that I believe that we already have regulations and laws that are supposed to guide how old cars have to be before they're allowed into the country as second-hand cars or not, right? To what extent are we enforcing that, right? The kinds of vehicles that come, I believe that in terms of the big auto plants that continue to, be patronized by government agencies, departments, and, and all of that, I believe the Nigerian market is so big a market, is so huge a market, that it just takes a pronouncement that, deliberate steps have to be taken, to begin to set up auto, assembling plants in our country by those who have not. Otherwise, we're going to stop patronizing them. I think that if such statements are made, the internal market is so important to all of them that they'll begin to take some steps and things like that. So that sector, I mean, it's quite. I'm talking about, I mean, sometime last month, I inaugurated, an electric, vehicle assembly, assembly plant, and all of that. So the NADDC has been pursuing this, because, I mean, I've said it elsewhere, that Nigeria within the continent of Africa may have lost out in terms of the auto industry, in terms of, I mean, at some point several years ago, we were at the same level with a country like South Africa. But today, if you look at the auto producing market, South Africa and Morocco are far ahead of Nigeria. And I think that the electric vehicle thing is relatively new. And if we've been beaten on the other, challenge, we cannot afford to be beaten in terms of the adoption and introduction of electric vehicles and all that in our country. Similarly, the CNGs, the NADDC has actually done quite a lot of training programs for the adoption of, CNG vehicles. Other than that or outside that, they've been doing quite a lot of work in terms of end-of-life vehicles. We're talking about, again, increasingly, getting us to understand, the secularity of the industrial economy, the fact that there's nothing that is a waste anymore, that everything can always be repurposed, for something else and all of that. So all of that is going on, and I think that the auto assembly plants that are in country already, I mean, are having a good laugh and praying, hopefully, that this gets done, that this policy gets to happen. In terms of the sessions that I've had with NADDC, I've also challenged them in terms of the oversight they're providing over these auto assembly plants, that one of the things that makes the more renowned and big auto companies, to beat them to their game is the existence of the various spare parts, the various auto mechanics, and things like that. And you may not be able to achieve that in the short term, but I think that if they come together and they consolidate their services and all of that, they'll be able to, because somebody who wants to buy a particular car that is assembled in Nigeria, let's say it comes from a state like Cross River, he also wants to be mindful that he can easily get parts and all of that. Service, I mean, it's going to be a journey, but what is important is that as we start that journey, let it be a journey that's going to be sustained. I mean, let there be demonstrable actions on the part of all of us to give confidence to people, to the investments. That pronouncement in itself alone is going to lead to quite a lot of investments in country. But those investors, especially because of the volume of resources they will need to commit, also need to be sure that we are serious about enforcing this and about getting this to happen.
Senator John Enoh, thank you so much. I hope we could continue. It was an interesting conversation, but that's our time. Thank you so much. Minister of State for Industry, Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. Thank you so much, Honorable Minister.
Thank you.
Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you too.
All right.